Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everybody, it's Jared. Thanks for joining us once again on All Things Crime. We have an amazing guest this morning. Her name's Heidi Chance. She's out of Arizona. And the accolades and the experience that, in doing some research on Heidi is so long that you're just going to have to look it up yourself. But in short, she served 25 years with the Phoenix Police Department and then has kind of branched into all sorts of areas of expertise, most importantly, focusing on sex trafficking. So, Heidi, welcome to the show, and I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about even your background prior to becoming a police officer. So, first of all, in your background, what inspired you to become a cop?
Yeah, so it's hard to say I have a lot of background before becoming a police officer because I actually started my career at 18 with Phoenix Police Department. A lot of the reasoning for that came from, wanting to go in the military. I actually wanted to go in the Air Force. I switched high schools just to go to junior ROTC because I thought, I did want to be a police officer, but I thought I had to wait until I was 21 to do anything with the police department. So I was actually going to fill that time with the military. And so that was the plan until mid-senior year. Phoenix Police Department created a cadet trainee program and created positions, paid positions. I started off making $9.48 an hour working for the police department in 1996 at 18. And it was a pilot program. They still have it to this day, although I'm not sure that it's compensated. But it was originally 5 of us, and I was badge number 2 and the first female they've ever had.
Oh, nice. Just paving the way from day one right here. So
Yes.
It's awesome. Yeah. I've known a number of people in the Phoenix area that are police, and just I've just really been impressed with most of the people that I've met out of Arizona. That just a great number of people down there. So too hot for me though. Can't imagine being in full vest and all the gear you packed around. Imagine the air conditioning in your squad car was pretty nice once in a while, right?
Yeah, we leave the cars on and we look for shade everywhere.
Well, that's awesome. So at what point in your career did you start to focusing on, the sex crimes?
Yeah, so I had been in patrol and then I decided to start a family. And so when I was pregnant, I tested for a position called School Resource Officer, SRO. And I actually I blinked and 6 years went by as an SRO. I didn't really have any plans to make any moves or anything, but we couldn't take the police car home. We have to return the keys every day. So I was at the station and I was putting the keys in the box and I was walking past an area of the station where we have juvenile holding rooms. And those rooms are, like just 2 chairs and a door with a window so you can monitor what's going on inside the juvenile room, just in case. And I passed the room and this little girl was sitting in there. And I recognized her as a student from when she was in 7th or 8th grade at the middle school that I was an SRO at. And she recognized me as the cop from her school. And I peeked my head in there and asked her, "Why are you in trouble?" And she said she was under arrest for prostitution. And, I had been a police officer 8 years by then. I knew prostitution was a crime. It was a pretty residential area, the precinct that I worked. I just didn't know that kids got involved in that. And so that was pretty shocking for me to have that happen. And then uniquely at around the same time, I got asked to shadow and do like a temporary assignment with the Vice unit at the time. It was called Vice. Now it's the Human Exploitation and Trafficking unit. And I started doing undercover work with them, posing as a prostitute on the street. And I fell in love with the work. I fell in love with the mission and trying to figure out how to prevent youth from becoming involved in this. And so that is kind of the evolution of how I moved, my career path for the whole rest of the half of my career, because I spent almost 14 years in that unit.
Wow. Most of the officers that I've talked to in the past that have worked in sex crimes don't last more than a few years just because it's so horrible.
Yeah, so there is actually like a rotation where you're only allowed to stay for 5 years, but
Mm.
there's like a workaround where you would surrender your undercover um, personas, like your social security card, your undercover driver's license, and you turn that in for a year, and then you can start the clock over again. So a lot of us,
Mm.
because we work so well together, I mean, those officers are my family, and we are very, very close, even to this day, even though I retired in October of 21. And
Yeah.
it was you were just barely getting your feet wet and getting yourself going when that 5 years hit. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
understand the reasoning for these rotations to kind of give us other experiences within the department or an opportunity to leave if we wanted to. But, it was one of those where we were just, barely getting the community support, attending meetings, doing training. Of course, we don't want to leave. So I was happy that there was a workaround.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what I meant by that was that that when you're dealing with especially children that have been exploited, especially sexually and abused, um, the psychological damage to them, just the man, how do you even? I mean, it's a lot of their damage isn't visible. It's not physical. It's psychological and emotional. And I think the toll that it takes on the officers that are investigating those, uh, I know I couldn't do it. I would, I'm pretty sure I would lose it. Um, Especially I do have a background in the military, and so that's kind of how I can relate so well to you guys. I think there's a little bit of a camaraderie between the military and law enforcement that I think a lot of people can't really understand if you're not in at least one of the two. But to me, I just the anger and the fury that I experience just in seeing some of these poor kids that have been abused in such a horrific way. Uh, is there something that you would do as far as a personal exercise in order to get yourself ready for the day for those kind of things?
Well, I mean, I think that I've been blessed with a lot of strength from God because, it is definitely difficult, especially as a female, to not get emotional when you hear another female describing the awful things that happened to her and that she had to go through. And it isn't where I could ever avoid getting emotional because, those things definitely happened. But I definitely think that I was put in the right place to be doing what I'm doing. And my dad said the name Heidi means warrior and
Mm.
and noble and brave. And so I really think that I really have a mission that I'm carrying out that God has put me in, and that um, He's armed me with the strength to pursue going on and getting to the bottom of things and holding people accountable and getting victims justice. So I think that's what motivates me. That's what um, helps me compartmentalize. I think a lot
Mm.
of my own feelings and pursue these people with everything I have.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like I said, I as soon as I was reading about that, I knew you were special. So
Thanks.
um, I hope you'll take some of those accolades because I'm and praise really because it seriously it takes a special type of person to be able to do that at all, let alone for 14 years. Holy cow, that's amazing. And you know what? I'd like to emphasize this a little more for some of my listeners uh, that may not fully understand some of the things that people in the law enforcement that work sex crimes. So let's do this. If you were trying to convince your niece to not pursue the same path that you've followed, just because you know that she probably couldn't handle it, what kind of examples would you give of things that you've experienced that might convince her to not actually go into to sex trafficking in law enforcement?
Well, in my position, I did undercover work as well as investigations. So we didn't have the luxury, even though Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the United States, our agency only had a whopping 9 detectives in that unit that handled the entire city. And to put it in perspective, Las Vegas Metro PD, they have 2 full squads of about 24 detectives. Half does just undercover work. They don't even do investigations, and they hand it off to the detectives that do. But at Phoenix, we were both hats. And so a day could be where I was posing as a prostitute on the side of the road, and then all of a sudden, patrol would come in contact with a juvenile that they feel is suspicious of being exploited as a victim of trafficking, and we'd have to stop everything and go take off the undercover hat and then put on the detective hat to go, be a forensic interviewer and conduct an interview, and then ultimately write a warrant, and then go find this person, break down doors, and go get them. So that was every day. And when I say that those officers are working their asses off, they are working their asses off. I mean, yes, there's incentives over time, the hopes to live long enough to live out your retirement, but the daily, they are not eating right. They are not sleeping right. They are not even having a moment to deal with anything that happened the day before, because the next day there's another victim. It's that overwhelming right now.
Yeah.
And I can't even explain why it's that overwhelming, other than media and TV and movies kind of almost glorifying, or like pimp my ride, pimp my apartment, pimp this, pimp that, and kind of making it seem like that's like an aspiring thing to be doing with your life. And what really a pimp is an awful person that is exploiting many other people and affecting the rest of their life. So it's really, really a difficult task to take on fighting this crime, for sure.
So out of all of the victims that you dealt with, are there any in particular that kind of hang on into your mind, and if so, why, what happened to them?
Yeah, so there are several. One in particular, she was held up in an apartment. She was 16, and she was basically not allowed to leave this apartment, and men would come to have sex with her. That the pimp, I don't know if it was word of mouth, because this is one of those cases that really irritated me, because I had only her word against his word. And I have never, in my whole career since or prior to this moment, had to let a pimp walk out the doors of the police station without going to jail. But that did happen in this instance. And it was because he didn't advertise her. We didn't have the phone evidence. Everything she said, I absolutely believe happened. But I can't just go off of her word. I have to have some kind of corroborative evidence to say this happened, to put someone in jail. And I've worked really hard to not ever let that happen again. But karma's a bitch, and he got his own, and he's no longer with us because he was also in gangs. But, I never got a chance to actually get her justice with that particular trafficker. But she was actually sold to that trafficker. He was the last of her 3 that she had, and I got all the other 3. So I'm happy with that result. We even went to California to go get one of the pimps, and found him pimping two other girls, and helped Anaheim PD with the rest of that case. But it definitely it's difficult when that is not a win in my book, because I would have rather have gotten all four of them.
So she was, you said she was sold?
Yes, which is also something that goes on here that people don't realize.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And at 16, she was basically in a hotel room just waiting for the next guy to show up.
Yeah. So what happened originally with the original three pimps and the one that really trafficked her initially is she was at a party. That's how this happened. She was at a party and she went with them to go get more beer and never came back. And they took her to a hotel. They got her high on weed and alcohol, and all three of them had sex with her. And then they talked about this, what we're going to be doing now. It really wasn't a choice. She was taken from the neighborhood that she knew, and this was at 15, by the way, when she first got into sex trafficking. And she was removed from the familiar area. So when you're taken from where you know and you go to another place, you don't know where to go to leave, to call. Does anybody remember phone numbers anymore right now? Because they're all programmed in the phone. But what if your phone's taken away from you? And it was also compounded a problem where her mom wasn't really responsible for her. She was kind of doing her own thing. And so this is why this 15-year-old is allowed to go to a party that she shouldn't have been at with adults in the first place, and no father figure. And so this is what happened. And in being with these other individuals initially for the first several months, that's when she was sold ultimately to this last pimp that I had to let walk out the door.
So this girl, did she have any kind of an estimate of how long she was there, or how many times she was abused?
Yeah, so this went on her entire year of being 15 and into 16. So uniquely, and I don't normally talk about this, but after I resolved her case and my partner and I got those three pimps, we were done. I mean, she was no longer, we had no more responsibility for her. Her mother ended up signing over her rights to her to Department of Child Safety, CPS. And so she was living in a group home. And this girl is beautiful, like stunning, like she's half black, half white. She's beautiful. She is also musically talented. She can play the piano by ear, and sings as well. So like she could be the next Alicia Keys in my mind. And I just had a connection with her. And so I was talking to my partner at the time, and we were driving up to northern Arizona to go interview a victim of another case. And he was like, "You should adopt her," and he suggested it. And I thought about it. I'm like, "Do you really think? I wonder what that process is like." And so I came home and I talked to my husband about all of that, and we actually went through all the classes to become foster parents specifically for her. And people don't, like, all these people in these foster parenting classes wanted babies. Like, they didn't want a teenager, but I wanted her to give her a different life and a different path to go on. And so we ended up bringing her into our home. She lived with us for 9 months. When I picked her up from the group home, the girls were jealous that she got to go home with a family, and they poured bleach all over her clothes. And they gave me her clothes in garbage bags, by the way, from the group home. So I ended up replacing her entire wardrobe, and we made a room for her. And so one of the visits, when she came to visit us before we actually signed the papers and got her, we painted the room with her and made it all her own and decorated it and everything. I mean, this was all in on trying to give her a better life. And it was one of those where the first week I caught her with marijuana. So, And I know, and I told her, you don't see me in uniform because I'm undercover, but I am still a police officer, and you cannot have drugs in my house. My son was 10 at the time, and he was in the room next door to her. And so I drove her to this place called Task, which is basically if you use drugs, they test you. And I said, do we need to go inside, or do we have an understanding that we'll never have this problem again? And, I wanted to believe her. And so I gave her a chance, and we never had the problem up until a few months later when she was bebopping up the stairs and a little baggie of a white powdery substance fell out of her shorts. And I look at it, and I went out to my garage, and I took my drug test kit, and it tested positive for cocaine. And I called her down the stairs, and I basically told her, you cannot have cocaine in my house. Where did this come from? And this is a situation where she literally came into my life with 6 credits for high school. That's it. Like, she had not really gone to high school and she's turning 17 soon. So I had her at an accelerated school that did in-person and online. And she said she wanted to get her diploma. So I'm going to make it where you have an opportunity to get your diploma. And maybe I had put too much on her. I don't know. And I'd never raised a teenager before either, by the way. I had a 10-year-old. So I didn't know all of this boyfriends and, sneaking drugs and all this stuff that I invited into my home and my family trying to help this little girl. And ultimately it ended 9 months later, not so happy ending. She was getting into an argument with my husband, and he was on the phone with me. I was at work on Saturday, of course. And basically he had said, I don't know what she's doing. She's in the shower. And I had a feeling. And so I told him, go check the bedroom and see if she's packing her stuff up. And she had packed all her stuff up. And I said, take her phone and put all that stuff in the trunk of the car, and I'm on my way. Because I knew she was trying to leave, and I was responsible for her, so I can't let her run away. So I was trying to make it home, but she ended up running. I had him call the police department. They found her. And I don't know, these officers are new or something, but they literally were talking to my husband, let her out of the car. She went in our front door, out the back door, and over the wall and ran again. And so they had to find her again. And by that time, I came home, and I told the officers, don't even let her out of the car. She's no longer our foster daughter. I had to cut the cord because it was at that point in time, and all of these things had happened. I mean, the cocaine, she went to juvenile jail, drinking underage, partying, sex in my house, all the things that should not have been going on that I was doing my best to manage and not allow to happen were happening. And it was affecting my relationship with my husband and my son. Like, this whole 9 months I spent with her was all consuming with me and her. Like, I was not available to my husband and my son. And so I had to make that decision. And it was a hard decision. And, we have spoken since, her and I, and she apologized. But it was very, very difficult. So I went above and beyond trying to, help one of my victims. And I'm glad I did, because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about what happens to victims after, which I don't think people talk about or realize either, that just because we got the guy in custody or we even went to trial and they're in prison doesn't mean anything stopped. The trauma and the things that happen to these victims, none of that stops. So, it was an experience.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.